Welcome to RSG Insider's podcast, where we bring together local voices from across government to talk about programs and policy. My name is Sara Court. I'm a consultant here at RSG, and today's conversation is all about housing and how cities are navigating and implementing local housing policies and programs. I've had the opportunity to work with cities across the state of California on tenant protection measures and rent stabilization, so I'm especially excited about today's conversation. I am here today with some folks who are doing this work on the ground, whether that be through local city leadership or through the consulting work that we do here at RSG. So let's start off with a brief round of introductions. Leilani, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, and thanks for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Leilani Hines. I'm the housing director for the City of Oceanside, and I've been the director for the last 4 years now. Previously, I've always worked for smaller jurisdictions, and previously I come from the cities of Chula Vista and then starting my career off in the City of Carlsbad.
And I'm Mandy Mills, the Director of Housing and Homeless Services for the City of Carlsbad. And I also have been there for the last 4 years. And like Leilani, I've been doing this work in local government for over 30 years with the County of San Diego, the City of Chula Vista, as well as the City of Encinitas and now Carlsbad.
And hello, I'm Dena Fuentes, and I have primarily worked in my career in the field of housing and community revitalization, and I've worked with the cities, not Carlsbad, but have worked with the cities of Vista, Poway, also started my career in Oxnard and ended up retiring as a deputy executive officer for San Diego for San Bernardino County, and have been with RSG for the last 3 years as a director.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Throughout our conversation today, you'll also hear Dena jump in to kind of help guide the discussion and bring a consultant perspective to this important work. But like I mentioned, today we're really digging into how housing programs get off the ground and how cities are kind of taking policy goals and turning them into programs that work in their city. So we know that vision can come from a number of places, whether it be the city council direction, the voice of the community or community advocates, or state level mandates that are coming through. But we know that the real challenge is kind of building a program that really works in your city. So to kick us off, I was hoping that you could each share about a housing initiative that is a big priority in your city, specifically one that you've helped with implementing.
Sure, I'd like to start that conversation. For us in Oceanside, a big focus has been updating our inclusionary housing policy. We started that work in 2021, and it's especially became a focus for us as a result of completing the sixth housing element cycle. We had some huge RHNA or regional housing needs assessment goals out of that, and so it really started that discussion with our city council. So we began it with the direction that we needed to do more production of affordable housing. And really in our city, our past history has been to collect it in lieu fee. It was really relatively low, $9 a square foot. So what developer doesn't want to jump on $9 a square foot? And so that's how we were implementing our inclusionary policy. And then staff would work with partners, affordable housing developers, partner and do 100%. So now with the shift in the big production numbers, they said, let's get away with the fee. And so the first step was we started to look at our in lieu fee and doing a study on that. But of course, it's not just about the fee. We knew that there were going to be other issues that we needed to look at. It couldn't just be just that. So the real key is really to look at what the issues might be, analyzing the problem, and analyzing it from multiple perspectives. So when I mean multiple perspectives, obviously the development community is a big partner. They're the ones who are building and providing. They're the ones who are going to work with the policy. So the first step of really trying to understand, what is it? What was their needs? What are they looking at beyond just the fee? Because the fee is more of a slap on the hand. It's the stick approach to it. And then on the flip side, the beneficiaries are also part of the equation. Our city council, our community, the residents, what do they need from the program? And so taking a look at all those different perspectives and figuring that out, and understanding if we raise the threshold, what is that going to do for the developers? Is that going to kick it over financial feasibility? And so then, therefore, we don't look at that policy. Then for the beneficiary side, maybe there's something we could do with the policy that really meets the needs of our community. Maybe we're serving larger families. They need 3-bedroom units. So how do we encapsulate all those different needs to something that's kind of shared, that balances all of those different priorities and needs, and then come up with a policy? So in the end, while council may have given us a directive, look at just the in-lieu fee, we really needed to take a much broader look. And it's our job, I think, as city staff to really use the knowledge, the experience that we have to fill in those gaps and to understand what's missing, to come up with a better policy than we may have started out with based on the council direction. And so in the end, we did a number of tweaks. We not only upped our fee and doubled it, but we also aligned it with the state density bonus program so that there was a seamless transition, and that helped to incentivize the developers. And we added a few other things that would benefit our low-income community.
Awesome. That's a really great example of aligning a program or policy with production goals and really bringing all voices to the table. Mandy, what's been a key initiative for the City of Carlsbad?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'd love to offer another example. City of Oceanside and the City of Carlsbad, a collaborative effort right now through the encampment resolution funding grant from the state of California. So originally identified kind of a problem area, and there's an area between our two cities where the border, moves quite a bit, and so there's a lot of encampments along this area. There's a riverbed and some freeway areas, and so we would get respectively, each city would get, complaints from our residents about a certain area. And, sometimes it would actually be in the other jurisdiction. And, we never want to answer somebody, oh, well, that's not our problem, go contact somebody else. So, we had talked about it for a while, like, how can we address this area? And really, it was going to require significant resources to really, really permanently address the situation. So I guess we had already identified the need, and then fast forward when the state of California issued a NOFA for encampment resolution funding, we talked to each other and said, this is the perfect opportunity. And so we went ahead and applied and were successful in that grant. So now we're in the implementation phase, and what it allows us to do, it's really a unique approach. We are really permanently solving, someone's homelessness, as opposed to just moving them out of an encampment. So we're not just saying, oftentimes the jurisdiction will try to clear out an encampment, and what it really does is it just moves the problem somewhere else, sometimes to a neighboring jurisdiction. So we really just are kicking the can down the road, or, really moving the problem elsewhere. So what we're able to do is really move people to housing or some interim situation that they might need. And that allows us to really close that encampment for good, and to really prevent repopulation of that encampment. Because of the joint funding and the joint effort, it really allows, outreach workers to kind of work together and collaboratively, as opposed to, they're not worrying about that jurisdictional boundary. So our police departments and our public works department, our housing departments, we're really working together on this, and we have, both teams on the field together working in both jurisdictions. And so it's a real good model, and we've seen a lot of success already.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing. And that really offers kind of a broad perspective of different types of programs in cities and how you're kind of responding to the local need with policy and different funding opportunities. I'm hoping you can elaborate a little bit more on kind of what brought these efforts or goals to the forefront in your city.
So for us on the inclusionary housing side, again, it was coming off of the 6 housing element cycle. And so that state level action really sparked the conversation, really, for us. And then the other part that also sparks the conversation is there's no denying the data and the demographics. And so for the city, when you start to look at those demographics, as we did in the housing element, and you're showing that your community is 50% low income, that 41% of them are paying more than 50% of your housing costs. Both the laws, your profile, and your demographics are pushing you that way. So it was really easy for council to jump from, let's not collect the fee, let's actually produce housing. That's what our community needs. That's what the state is telling us to do. And so for us to really even move it forward, again, recognizing that our developers are really the producers of the housing. And so we needed to take a partnership type of mindset to that discussion. And so pulling them in early into the discussion, asking them, what is it that you need from us that will help facilitate this to be much more of a partnership? Really key to that. It also helped that as part of the production piece of it, our council said, what other things can we do? And the council held a community workshop where they brought in stakeholders, whether they were community members or developers, to talk about and to get us all on the same page and the shared understanding of what are the needs within the communities? What are the roles people have to produce housing? What are some of the best practices? What are we already doing? So that bringing people together to the table to develop that shared understanding, the knowledge and the experience, and then you get a better result. And that helps to shape everything and moving forward to a better policy. And you get much better alignment when you're bringing all the right people to the table. That's really key.
Definitely. Mandy, your example touches on a different piece of the housing puzzle, homelessness and cross-jurisdictional collaboration. So what did you see as kind of bringing that joint encampment program to the forefront in your city?
I think in this example, a key issue is really funding availability and being able to respond when an opportunity became available. So we already knew of this common need and this kind of joint need. We also understood that really to follow best practices and really try to find permanent movement for people experiencing homelessness, it was going to take a lot of resources, of which we did not have. So in this case, when the funding became available, we really were able to look at it and say, this meets our needs, and I think we're going to be able to score pretty well. Like, let's try to get that. So in this situation, we had the need, but the really key piece that was missing was the funding. And so being able to already have your needs identified and being able to respond when a funding opportunity became available, that was really key.
I would also want to add on that what the public has to say and what they communicate can also drive some of the priorities. So I talked a little bit about inclusionary housing, right? And it's state law that was dictating. It was our demographics that were dictating policies. Sometimes it is all of that, plus all of the public perceptions, the emails, the phone calls that really drive your policy as well. And so there are opportunities there, and then it is backed up by your community. For us, like in Oceanside, that was a very well publicized priority. In our polling for our tax measures, that came out, homelessness and our response to homelessness was the #1 priority that they wanted us to address with the tax measure going forward. So that can also really drive and shift priorities as well.
Well, the programs that you guys have described sound amazing, both from your respective approaches for your individual communities and identifying something that is shared, that you can then have that shared vision and be responsive when funds become available. So Mandy, I was curious from the standpoint of what are the challenges of getting a program going from the ground up?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, obviously having resources available is going to be a huge constraint for everybody. So being able to look at a funding opportunity and see if it like meets your needs is really something. If you can jump and be successful in taking advantage of that, and then really making sure that the goals are clear to everybody, especially like in a situation where you have collaboration with another jurisdiction. Are we on the same page? Like you begin, as you know, Covey always mentioned, you begin with the end in mind. So knowing what are we trying to achieve, how are we getting there, what are the steps, making sure that all the steps are clear, and checking in along the way. Are we still on the same page? Are we getting to where we're trying to go? And really being able to be flexible and adapt along the way, I think, are some of the challenges to implementation.
Getting a program from the ground up. I think what Mandy talked about, the alignment and making sure that you are communicating all the time with your different stakeholders, with your policymakers, you're strategizing and thinking that out clearly. I think sometimes we are quick to respond to a political pressure or political will and not always doing a little bit of that background and that research to really fully understanding what some of the consequences could be, what the real needs are, and what the issues really are. Are you solving the real issue, or are you just responding to a political will or a political desire to move something?
And your collective overview, as you were describing and having your conversations, particularly when you're doing a collaborative process, it's kind of had the visual in my mind of a Venn diagram, and then seeing where from the joint jurisdictions, where you have that overlap and consistency so that you can partner and again, check in. And so a lot of it, what you've described is about, being adaptive and being flexible and responsive. Particularly, from how you go about developing and implementing programs for your respective communities and or joint efforts. And it also reminds me from the standpoint of being quick, adaptive, and responsive of how things happened after COVID and the COVID post-recovery, because that kind of complemented between standing up programs that you already had experience doing, but it was a matter of having the resources and implementing best practices and scaling it up versus something completely different and new that you were just going from the ground up of creating. So to me, your programs have been very, very interesting in what you've established.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I would add, trying to, as you mentioned the COVID era, and trying to come up with brand new programs to respond to a new problem that quickly was very challenging. So we're kind of in an era now where we're a little bit back to looking at other best practices, modeling other jurisdictions, like seeing what has worked and what has not worked. So we're kind of back to normal implementation, thank goodness, because that was a really tough period to be able to respond so quickly to something so new.
And I think from the standpoint too is it expanded your partnerships, because between strengthening amongst the jurisdictions, but also the providers. And you knew homeless was going to be still an ongoing thing post-COVID. So it provided a lot of opportunity from scaling up and learning from that perspective.
Yeah. I think if I had to say that there was a theme, this idea of collaboration and leveraging, I think we, especially as smaller jurisdictions, have very finite resources. And we're trying to respond to the economics of the day, the politics of the day, the environment as a whole. And so that means that we have to respond sometimes more quickly than we want. And so being able to leverage existing programs, leverage networks and folks that we know and best practices, and building on our network is really essential and key to moving programs, policies into actual action and implementation.
Yeah, and I would just add, make sure you are also asking the questions of like, what didn't work? What lessons did you learn? Because, if the City of Oceanside has already gone through a program that we're looking at and they learned some lessons, we're going to want to know what that is to kind of avoid that in the future. So it's ask all those questions.
An ERF model is a really good one. We stood up that program based upon best practices of what we learned from other communities who are making real progress in addressing homelessness. We took those pieces, implemented it, and we're being strategic, and we've divided the area into zones. We've just completed Zone 1, which is in the City of Oceanside. We're moving to Zone 2. Through the Zone 1 implementation, we've also regrouped. We've regrouped between the cities with the providers to learn what went really well in Zone 1 and what didn't work, and where do we need to tweak that. So as we move from area to area, we're really fine-tuning it and getting better and better. And we've seen incredible success by using the best practices and then debriefing and tweaking where we need to tweak.
Great. So it sounds like, it's really about meeting the moment and taking advantage when an opportunity arises that might help your city to meet the needs. Do you have any other insights to share on approaching implementation, especially when you're really trying to balance that urgency with limited capacity?
Sure. Big believer, no need to recreate the wheel. Affordable housing and the issues of affordability have been with us for a really, really long time. So there isn't someone who hasn't done it somewhere. And so really trying to find those best practices, adapt them and rework them so that they work for your community based upon your demographics, maybe some of the priorities your community might have or your council has, and just adapting them that way. We have a great network here in the San Diego County region. I think we have a great network among city staff, as well as to our social service providers, our developers. So it's really easy to pick up the phone, your phone a friend, and say, hey, what are you doing? And it's especially critical in your region. So Carlsbad and Oceanside are neighbors. We're neighbors with Vista. And so calling them up to seeing what they're doing in their community is really, really helpful so that we can try to align programs to our needs, but sometimes align them across the board. For example, our Section 8 or our Housing Choice Voucher program. We really try to align ourselves not only with Carlsbad as our neighbor, because we will see residents who might decide to live in Oceanside, but want to live in Carlsbad. So the more that our programs look and feel a lot like each other, it's seamless because residents really don't, they know it's Carlsbad, they know it's Oceanside, but at the end of the day, that really doesn't matter to them. They just want a house and they want a home as barrier-free, as less regulated as possible. So the more we're in alignment, the better it is for the folks that are utilizing our program. So I think that's really important too, is consistency and alignment and talking with your peers and your network about how can you do things better and how can you be more aligned.
And to build on that, I would add our elected officials, also want to know, how is this being implemented in other places? Is it successful? Kind of why should we trust this? So when you do have examples of other jurisdictions that are already implementing something, it is nice to be able to say, we have vetted it, here are the other jurisdictions that are doing it this way. So it is nice to point that out to kind of have some legitimacy or credibility to the policy or the program that you're going to implement.
Legitimacy, credibility, and most jurisdictions don't want to be the first one out the gate and proving a program. They'd rather stay the course and do something that is innovative and best practice, but not necessarily taking that risk of being the real innovator in the room.
And could you also talk a little bit when you're doing implementation about how you go about checking in on your programs as it relates to are they meeting and resolving the issue that you and or your council had identified and or maybe circumstances have changed as well. So can you kind of talk about how you address that when you're dealing with program implementation?
Sure, I'll start us on that one. I think that's a key part of the implementation is constantly checking in to make sure you are achieving your intended consequences. oftentimes there are unintended consequences. So being able to identify those, make course corrections along the way. Don't be married to something so much that, it's so rigid that it has to go a certain way. If you are finding that it's not going as planned, be willing to kind of talk about it with your team and the group and saying, okay, well, maybe we didn't get it quite right the first time. Like, how should we pivot? What needs to be kind of altered a little bit, and be willing to do that. So yeah, I think just be open and willing to do that, and constantly checking in throughout, and then at the end too. So at the end, kind of like, okay, is that what we intended? And being able to report out on that.
And I think we've seen that with our tenant programs. For example, we launched a program to help with rental assistance and screening applications. And that is an example of both doing a little bit more research and understanding what the issue is, and then coming up with a solution that addresses that. We came up with a program because there was a community concern that folks were not utilizing or paying too much for screening reports. And we put out that program. And then we saw the market kind of cool off, and folks weren't moving from unit to unit. And so the money's kind of sat there. But we need to be able to say, hey, it's not working. We're not getting a lot of folks turning in applications wanting that program. And it's because of the market. And then being able to report back to council, hey, maybe this is not the program that we need. Maybe there are other issues out there that we need to dive deeper into. But you need to be able to say, yes, we've done this, but it isn't necessarily answering the need that we have today, because the market changes, the environment changes, and so you need to be flexible to respond to those issues as well.
And I think what you both described as it relates to from RSG and our clients that we work with, the different jurisdictions, you're describing a very consistent approach, which is usually most programs, unless you were in the 1980s and 90s when these programs were initially funded, a lot of it you aren't necessarily standing up from scratch, and being smart about relying upon best practices and what works, and then customizing it for your respective communities based upon your demographics, your needs, your funding, your policies. And that's something that we see throughout the state, which is good. And then also, again, always having the ability to do modifications based upon and looking back at are you achieving the goal? Are you making a difference versus just getting the money, receiving the money and getting it spent? Are you really accomplishing the objective that the council and the community has set out for you?
Yeah.
Results.
Results. Yeah. It's got to be more than checking a box at, oh, we have a program. Oh, we have a program. Is the program successful or is it not? Is it needed? Is it not needed?
And when you look at North San Diego County, an example of what was created and has still lasted all this time was the Interfaith Shelter Network on the rotational winter shelter models, which was a North County collaborative approach and jointly funded, working with the nonprofits. And that sounds, very similar, I think, in a different perspective, again, coming from the two cities of the efforts of Carlsbad and Oceanside on the encampment resolution program. So kudos to you on that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I love this conversation about what I'm hearing is resourceful and adaptable. And, I think we know even if we have, all the best practices, all of the, strong support networks to lean on, still implementation can kind of not exactly go as planned. So I wanted to close this out to talk a little bit about some of those challenges and some maybe pitfalls or roadblocks that you've encountered through your experience with housing program implementation, and what has really stuck with you in terms of lessons learned?
I think to start off with, affordable housing and responding to the needs is a complex issue. There's a lot of factors. You can say that the housing issues are a result of issues with equality and income, right? Or other programs that might be available or not available. So there are a lot of factors that go into it. There's also the financing of affordable housing and the complicated nature of that. So it's a very complex world. And for our politicians, for our public, it's not so complicated to them. Again, they just want a roof over their head. The fact that it cost $800,000 to build, beyond their comprehension. And so it does fall to us, I think, as staff members in trying to level set and to provide information and understanding of what the issues are. So trying to provide it in more simplified terms, maybe compartmentalizing it and breaking it down so that there is understanding. It also takes a long time for us to resolve some of these issues. And so like homelessness is one of those issues where our constituents say, why haven't you done it already? Why don't you just house them? It's a perfect example of how complicated the issues can be. And even with the ERF model, I think we received the money and our constituents, our electeds were saying, you got the money months ago. Where are you with that? And implement it now, even though we may not have had all our ducks in a row. We may not have had all of the providers contracted and ready to go, but an expectation level of you've got to resolve these issues now. So those are some of the pitfalls that I think we all face when we're implementing programs, is the complexity and the nature of the problems, and then the coordination and collaboration that sometimes takes more time than folks are willing to wait through. And so really educating folks, communicating often as to what the issues might be, so it doesn't look like you've just forgotten about the issue and you're not being proactive. I think those are some ways in which we can try to resolve some of those pitfalls. I think politics also drives into the pitfalls for us, both on the inclusionary housing side, and now we're looking at tenant protections. We started in 2021, right, with our inclusionary housing ordinance. It took us, I think we did 2 or 3 updates to the inclusion. Every year we had an update, but that was when we first started out. Our council was a little bit more conservative, more business-minded, so they said, just up the fee. Then we had an election in which the council dynamics shifted, and we had a few more members that were more advocates, and they wanted to ensure our low-income residents had homes. So then the question became, well, you need to do more. Let's up the percentage from 10 to 20, 15%. And so those politics and how they shift and the dynamics in council also can become an issue for implementation. And then you just have to then step back, reframe what the question is, and start all over again. And as Mandy said, don't be married and tied to, well, we just did this a year ago.
Yeah, I think to build upon what Leilani's already been talking about, that you not only could you have these changes within the local level, but obviously at the state and federal level as well. So being able to, as we've already talked about, adapt and be flexible, willing to kind of, alter something mid-course. Transparency is key. People want to know, what are you doing with our public dollars? So there's a lot of distrust of, government in the current, era. And so being able to, and as she mentioned, these things take a long time. So being transparent about, this is what we're working on, this is what we have found, these are our successes, and being completely transparent about that along the way, constantly educating your policymakers as well as the public is really key, not only for keeping yourself motivated, because it is a long haul and it is a tough line of work. So it helps yourself and your staff to kind of keep celebrating those successes and, looking at your numbers, but also for education and credibility. So you're constantly making sure people know that you are using those public dollars for the public good, and that these programs should be trusted and you can be trusted with them. So I think those are key pieces for reporting out.
And I'll probably add to that in that I think we are all faced with a lot of issues we're trying to address. And so too often we are go, 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 go. And let's move on to the next and move on to the next. But celebrating the successes and getting that out there to the community and to your public is really important. It's not only important for the credibility, but future programs. And when you want to continue a program or launch off into a new program, you have that success behind you, that folks know that you can have success and we can do this. And so you're building that level of support for any future efforts you're doing.
Yeah, those are all really great points. And I think that your examples today really kind of reinforce that we're all doing a really similar dance. We're ready to pivot. We, have to reframe sometimes, meet the moment, while still keeping all of our long-term goals and goals of the city in mind. So thank you all for your incredible insights today. We really appreciate you coming and sharing your time and expertise with us. I really admire all of the work that you're doing in the field. And yeah, we just really appreciate you all being here. So stay tuned for more conversations with RSG on how local leaders are building capacity and driving results. We'll see you next time.